I always thought funerals were where families came together. Turns out, they're where the truth starts to rot. When my father died, the church was full of people who hadn't spoken to him in years. Business partners, cousins, friends who owed him favors. Everyone wore grief like designer clothing, tailored, expensive, and hollow. I sat in the front pew alone, watching my brothers shake hands with politicians and CEOs. They called him a visionary. I called him Dad. At least, I used to. When the service ended, the crowd followed the hearse to the cemetery like a parade of masks. My eldest brother, Gregory, stood near the coffin with his arm around his wife, pretending to comfort her. He'd already started talking about the company transition. I overheard him tell someone, "It'll be good to have fresh leadership." Fresh leadership. My father's grave hadn't even been covered yet. That night, I went home to the house I grew up in, a mansion that felt colder than any winter. Every picture on the wall was a reminder that I didn't belong there anymore. My name is Ethan Cole. I'm 36, youngest of 3 sons, and, according to my father's will, the disappointment of the family. We gathered the next morning at the law firm, mahogany tables, gold pens, silence heavy as marble. The lawyer, an older man named Mr. Davenport, had been with the family for decades. His eyes avoided mine. That was my first warning. Gregory leaned back in his chair, already smiling. "Let's get this over with," he said. "We all know what Dad wanted." Davenport cleared his throat. As per the last will and testament of Mr. Charles Cole, dated March 12, 2023. The sound of paper sliding out of an envelope was louder than breathing. The estate, including all company shares, properties, and financial assets, is to be divided between Gregory Cole and Andrew Cole. Gregory exhaled through his nose, a quiet laugh. Andrew, the middle brother, nodded like he'd known all along. I waited for the rest. My father had told me once, "Don't worry about money, son. Worry about purpose." Davenport hesitated. As for Ethan Cole, every head turned toward me. "Your father instructed that you receive his watch collection and a letter to be delivered after this reading." Gregory laughed out loud. "A letter? That's cute." The room felt smaller. My throat tightened. "That's it?" I asked. Davenport looked genuinely pained. "That's what the will states." Gregory stood, buttoning his jacket like a king. "Guess that's what happens when you walk away from the business, little brother. Loyalty pays. Poetry doesn't." I wanted to hit him, but grief makes cowards of men who were raised to be polite. So I just nodded and left. Outside, the city looked like it had already moved on. I sat in my car for half an hour, staring at my reflection in the windshield. The same brown eyes as my father's, the same stubborn jawline. The same man who apparently thought I wasn't worth a single share. At home, a courier was waiting. He handed me a small box and an envelope. "From Davenport's office," he said. Inside the box was my father's old Omega wristwatch, the one he wore every day, the one I used to sneak into his study to play with as a kid. It still ticked, quiet and perfect. The letter was folded once, thick paper, my name written in his exact, confident handwriting. I hesitated before opening it. "Ethan," it began, "if you're reading this, you already know what I left you, or rather what I didn't. I had to make choices that won't make sense until later, but trust me, they will. You've always been the only one who saw people for what they were, not what they had. That's why you couldn't stay. That's why I couldn't leave you the same world I built. There's more, much more. But for now, stay patient. When Davenport calls, listen carefully. The truth isn't in this will. It's in the next one. The next one. I read the line again and again, until the words burned into me. There's more. The truth isn't in this will. It's in the next one. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat with the watch ticking on the table beside me, every second louder than the last. At dawn, my phone rang. "Mr. Cole?" a voice said. It was Mr. Davenport. "I need you to come back to the office. There's something you should see. Your father left instructions for a second document, sealed separately. I wasn't aware of it until this morning." My pulse stopped for a moment. "A second will?" "Not exactly," Davenport said, lowering his voice. "It's a codicil, a secret one." I grabbed my coat and left the house before the sun finished rising. As I drove through the empty streets, I looked at the watch on my wrist, ticking steadily, as if counting down. For 36 years, I'd been my father's forgotten son. But now, it seemed, he'd been waiting for me to find something the others couldn't. And whatever it was about to change everything. The law office looked different in daylight, less intimidating, more tired. The blinds were half open, and dust hung in the sunbeams like secrets that had waited too long to be seen. Davenport stood behind his desk, his jacket off, sleeves rolled to the elbow. "You came fast," he said. "You said my father left something else," I replied. He nodded, gesturing toward a heavy brown envelope on the table. This was sealed inside the firm's safe, under a private client clause. I wasn't supposed to know it existed until today. It's addressed only to you. My father's handwriting again, sharp, decisive, familiar. Across the front. To be opened only by Ethan Cole. Inside, there wasn't money or contracts, but a single sheet of typewritten text signed with my father's initials at the bottom. Codicil to the last will and testament of Charles A. Cole. To my son, Ethan. By now you know what I left your brothers and what I didn't. You also know that a man's true legacy doesn't fit into numbers on a page. There are 3 things I kept separate from my estate. The truth about how it was built. The proof of who helped me build it. The debt I never repaid. If you want to understand me, if you want to see who your father really was, find the vault beneath 914 Kingsley Avenue in the old factory. Use the watch. It's the key. I looked up. The watch? Davenport nodded. Your father mentioned that old Omega more than once. He said you'd know what to do with it. I turned the watch over in my hand. It looked normal, silver, simple, well worn. But on the back, under the engraving CAC, there was a tiny groove, almost invisible. Davenport leaned closer. You should know, Ethan. Whatever he left there, it's off record. The codicil isn't legally binding, it's personal. Everything about my father was personal, I said. As I stood to leave, Davenport added, Be careful at that address. The Kingsley factory's been abandoned for years, but your father used to go there every Friday night. He said it was where he went to think. The drive across town took 30 minutes. By the time I reached the industrial district, the air had changed, thicker, heavier, like the past itself lived there. The old factory was a skeleton of red brick and rusted steel beams, windows broken, roof sagging under time's weight. A faded sign above the gate still read Coal Iron Works, though the company had shut down before I was born. Inside, dust muted every sound. My footsteps echoed off the concrete floor. I pulled out the watch again. The second hand ticked steadily, but when I pressed the crown, it clicked twice instead of once. A small compartment opened in the side of the casing, revealing a folded piece of paper. My father's handwriting again. If you're here, you're close. Go to the manager's office. Look under the floorboard by the east window. The office was upstairs, its door hanging crooked on one hinge. I stepped inside. The air smelled of oil, metal, and something faintly sweet. Old paper. The east window overlooked the river. Beneath it, the floor creaked under my weight. I knelt, pried up a loose board, and found a metal lockbox wedged between the beams. It was cold, heavier than it looked. On its lid, the initials CC were carved by hand. I forced it open. Inside were 3 items: a manila envelope marked Project Horizon, a small USB drive, and a photograph. The photo was black and white. My father standing beside a man I didn't recognize, both wearing suits, shaking hands in front of the factory. The other man had a scar along his cheek and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. On the back, in faded ink, Elias Gray, 1989. The name sounded familiar. I dug through the envelope. Inside were copies of documents, partnership contracts, offshore transfers, receipts for consulting services. The sums were enormous. And the company names: Gray Holdings, Iron Link, Horizon Logistics, were all subsidiaries of Coal Enterprises, the empire my brothers had just inherited. At the bottom of the pile was another handwritten note. If anything happens to me, it will be because of him. Do not trust Davenport until you've met the man in the photo. He knows everything. He also knows what he did. The blood drained from my face. I looked again at the photo, then at the USB drive. On impulse, I pulled out my laptop and plugged it in. The drive contained one video file, Horizon.mp4. The image flickered to life, grainy footage from what looked like an office security camera. My father sat behind a desk, looking older, tired. Across from him sat the man from the photo, Elias Gray. "You can't do this, Charles," Gray said. His voice was cold, measured. "You pull out now, we both burn." My father leaned forward. "You already burned it. The money, the deals, the offshore accounts, you used my name." Gray smirked. "You signed the documents." "I signed papers you forged." The audio crackled. My father's tone hardened. "If anything happens to me, this file will go public. Ethan will know. My son will fix what I couldn't." Then the video ended. I sat there for a long time, staring at the frozen frame. My father's eyes locked on the camera, like he was looking through time straight at me. Elias Gray, the man my father blamed, the man who'd helped build the fortune my brothers now celebrated, the man who was probably still out there. I packed everything, the photo, the file, the USB, the watch, into my bag and left the factory. Outside, the sky was the color of unpolished steel. The air smelled like rain and rust. My phone buzzed, a new message from an unknown number. "You shouldn't have gone there, Ethan." I froze. Then another message came through. "Your father thought he could hide the truth forever. He was wrong. Don't make the same mistake. There was no name, no signature. But I didn't need one. Whoever Elias Gray was, he knew I'd found the vault, and if he knew that, he probably knew where I was. I didn't drive home. I drove to the library, the only place that still makes chaos whisper. 10 minutes with public records and a half-dozen old business journals gave me what my father's video had promised. Elias Gray was not a ghost. He was a boardroom myth who refused to die. He'd started as a deal-maker in the late 80s, moved money for men who wanted outcomes without fingerprints. By the mid-2000s, he'd retired into philanthropy, grants to arts programs, scholarships with smiling photos, a foundation whose mission statement was so clean it squeaked. And tucked into the footnotes of a trade piece from 5 years ago, Gray Consulting retained by Cole Enterprises, Strategic Transition Advisory. Gregory's quote sat under it like a calling card. We're grateful for Mr. Gray's wisdom during this new chapter. I stared at the page until the letters lost their shape. The man who'd threatened my father on camera now advised my brothers. Either they didn't know who he was or they knew and didn't care. I wasn't sure which was worse. I called Davenport. He answered on the second ring, breathless. Ethan, where are you? Busy, I said. Did you know Gregory hired Elias Gray? A pause. He's a consultant. He's the arsonist, I said. Davenport lowered his voice. Come back to the office. This is not a conversation for phones. I hung up. Then I did what I would later call the most reckless thing of my life. I sent Gray an email. The address was easy to find. Men like him hide behind staff, not aliases. I kept it simple. I found the vault. We need to talk, face to face. Ethan Cole. I attached a still frame from the video, my father mid-sentence, Gray's profile lit like a confession. 5 minutes later, my phone vibrated. Cole Museum, 6 p.m., after hours. Come alone. It was perfect in a way that made my stomach twist, our family's public monument to itself. Glass, stone, a gleaming lobby of trophies. If Gray wanted home field advantage, he'd chosen it. By 6, the city had turned to chrome. The museum's lights glowed like old money. A guard met me at the door, wordless, and led me through a wing of photographs that told the story my brothers loved. The rise of Charles Cole, from the factory floor to the corner office, from soot to silk. The captions were polite. They skipped the names that mattered. Gray waited in the boardroom, a jewel box of a space overlooking the river, the city laid out like obedience. He was older than in the photo, of course, but the scar along his cheek had softened into something almost distinguished. His suit had the kind of drape you can't buy. You inherit it from confidence. He smiled as if I'd arrived for a charity lunch. Mr. Cole, he said, at last. Which one? I asked. The only one who writes his own emails. He gestured to a chair. Sit. You look like your father when he'd chosen a hill to die on. I didn't sit. You told him if he pulled out, you both burned. He sighed, patient, theatrical. Context, Ethan. Your father wanted to expand faster than banks like. I arranged alternatives, strategic vehicles, offshore cash flows. It was sophisticated. It was fraud. It was growth, he said, as if correcting a child. Then he grew a conscience at a dangerous moment. He recorded you. Gray's smile didn't waver. He recorded everyone. Paranoia is the poor man's due diligence. My knuckles ached. He said if anything happened to him, I'd know. And now you do. He stepped closer to the window, hands behind his back. the river reflected in the glass at his shoulder. Here's your problem. You think truth is a lever. It's not. It's a lens. You can look through it and see the machine, but you can't move the machine by looking. I can move a few people who control it, I said. A state attorney, a reporter, a judge who still believes the oath means something. By all means. He turned from the window, almost kindly. Drag 30-year-old contracts into a courtroom and explain shell structures to 12 bored citizens who didn't want jury duty. Demonstrate moral outrage at transactions the government blessed because the economy liked the taste. And when you finish, your brothers will sell this building to fund a settlement the board will call prudent. Then they'll rename the company and throw a gala. He spread his hands. Welcome to the world your father built and tried to unbuild. You're advising my brothers. They're advising me, he said, amused. That's how inheritance works. You inherit not just assets, but advisors. Gregory wants your father's seat without your father's shadow. Andrew wants everyone to stop asking him to decide things. Both want to keep our relationship quiet. So far, they've done a fine job. So why meet me? Because you sent me a picture I forgot to burn, he said lightly. And because you are a risk I prefer to understand. You didn't come asking for money. That makes you unusual. I didn't come to be bought. Everyone comes to be bought, he said. Some of us call it justice so we can sleep. I set the watch on the table between us. He built this with you, I said. Then he tried to fix it. Where does that leave me? With a choice, Gray said. You can be a martyr and bury your family's name under headlines for 6 months, or you can be an adult and negotiate. Keep the museum clean. Keep the charity checks arriving. Put conditions on me, on them. Trade the recordings for control. Control of what? He smiled. The codicil. I kept my face still. You know about it. Of course, he said. I helped your father draft it. He wanted leverage from beyond the grave. He loved a good twist. My pulse stuttered. So this was a game. Everything important is. He nodded at the watch. He hid the vault where only you would look. He counted on you to be the son who couldn't be bribed. He knew your brothers would take the bait of the first will and crown themselves. And he knew you'd keep walking after the cameras left. He studied me as if I were a theorem he enjoyed proving. He was right. What does the codicil give me? I asked. Not money, he said. Power. The kind that doesn't fit on a spreadsheet. It names you as the sole steward of, let's call them files of institutional memory. Copies of everything, notarized in entertaining ways. Enough to make a board behave without understanding why it wants to. He splayed his fingers. He didn't trust courts. He trusted leverage. You're describing blackmail. I'm describing governance in a country that prefers stories to statutes, he said. Your father learned late. You have a chance to learn early. The door opened. Gregory walked in, tie loosened, face flushed like he'd jogged up the stairs. So this is how you do it, he said to Gray, meeting my brother in my building. Your building, Gray echoed, not bothering to hide his smile. Gregory turned to me. You've been calling our people. Notes from Davenport. Weird questions from records. Rumors in the office. What's your plan, Ethan? Blow up Dad's legacy because he gave you a letter instead of stock? You left. We stayed. You stayed and hired the man who made him write the letter, I said. Gregory's eyes slid to gray for a fraction and back. Elias saved this company more times than you can count. While you wrote poetry in coffee shops, we were taking care of a payroll with 12,000 names on it. Paid with what? I asked. Shells? Loans against the future? Lies? He took a step closer. Don't lecture me about lies. You were Dad's favorite. He saved you from this. You think the watch on your wrist is romance? It's guilt with a strap. Gray watched us like a chess tutor, pleased with how quickly the board was getting messy. Gentlemen, he said, almost cheerful. There's a solution here. Gregory's jaw flexed. There is. Ethan takes whatever sentimental rights Dad left him, archives, the museum, whatever, and stays out of the boardroom. He gets a stipend, he makes speeches, he lets adults run a company. And adults keep you on a leash, I said to Gray. That's the solution. Gray's eyes warmed, like a teacher whose student had finally found the verb. Now you're speaking in our dialect. I picked up the watch. It felt heavier than metal. My father had built a maze and left me the thread. Except the thread led not to daylight, but to a darker room where deals were the only language. What if I want both? I asked. Truth and survival. Then you'll need a stage, Gray said, and a script your brothers can't interrupt. He slipped a slim folder from his jacket and set it on the table. Inside was a board calendar. Next week, emergency session, leadership transition. Underneath, 3 signatures. Gregory, Andrew, Chair Pro Tem. They intend to formalize what your father didn't, Gray said. There will be a vote. You will be invited to watch the coronation. I suggest you bring a different ceremony. What kind? The kind that makes men behave as if conscience were profitable, he said, amused. Bring Ruiz from accounts who can't be bought because his mother still irons his shirts. Bring the auditor who was fired in 2019 because she asked the wrong question. Bring a reporter who knows where to sit. And bring your father. He tapped the USB in my pocket like he'd put it there himself. Play the recording. Name the shell companies. Then offer a choice. You'll keep the tapes in the box and become the steward of the Coal Integrity Trust, not a board seat, something more elemental. Or you'll walk across the street to the Attorney General with your bag and your grief and let the city enjoy its scandal. Gregory laughed. You think a tantrum will scare us? Not you, Gray said mildly, but the pension fund on seat 4, the insurer on seat 7, the 2 bankers who hate explaining volatility to their wives. They will vote for bedtime. Gregory glared at him. We do this my way. Gray didn't bother answering. He looked at me instead. I'd like you to choose governance over gallows. Your father asked me to offer that. And if I choose the gallows? I asked. Then wear a clean shirt, Gray said. We'll all be on television. Gregory pushed back his chair so hard it scraped a line into the polished floor. You don't make threats in my building. I make weather, Gray said. Buildings respond. Gregory's phone buzzed. He glanced down, cursed softly, and left as abruptly as he'd arrived. The door's soft close felt like a judgment. Gray straightened his cuffs, the gentleman again. You have 72 hours, Ethan. Use them to collect affidavits and allies. Tell Davenport you want the codicil unsealed in a private session. Ask him how much he wants to fix what he failed to guard. He'll understand. You think I'll play your game, I said. I think you'll win it, he said. Because your father designed it for you. He moved to the door, paused. 2 last things. He tapped the scar on his cheek. Your father gave me this. He thought he was punching a thief. He was punching a mirror. Don't make his mistake. He smiled, but it didn't stick. And whatever you do, keep the watch wound. You'll need it. When he left, the room sagged with the weight of all the deals it had heard. I sat down, finally, and let the city move under me like a machine I was learning to operate without liking it. The museum's night guard coughed in the hall. The river kept its secrets. I held the watch to my ear and listened to the quiet, perfect ticks, a metronome for a song I hadn't learned yet. On the drive back to Davenport's, I called Andrew. He didn't pick up. I left a message anyway, calm, factual. I know about Gray. Meet me tomorrow, early. No Gregory. I didn't expect compliance. I needed a record. Davenport had a folder waiting, hands shaking the way honest men shake when they realize they've been standing beside a fire for years and only just felt the heat. Your father's codicil, he said. I didn't know the extent. You knew enough, I said. Can you convene a private session? He nodded. If you have cause. I have cause, I said, and laid the watch on the table like an oath. Now we need choreography. He exhaled. Then we do it properly. Notices, witnesses, a sealed minute book. And Ethan, what? Once we open this box, he said, touching the codicil with 2 fingers, we don't get to close it. I know, I said. Bring a pen. I left with a list, a schedule, and more fear than I wanted to admit. Outside, night had thickened. I walked the long way to my car, checked for a tail, didn't see one, and still drove like I had one. In the apartment, I spread the papers on the kitchen table the way you spread maps before a war. The video, the contracts, the board calendar. The codicil stayed sealed, one last secret with my name on it. I wound the watch and set it next to my father's letter. The truth isn't in this will. It's in the next one. Tomorrow I'd make them read it. Davenport's conference room felt smaller when it was honest. He'd cleared the table, closed the blinds, and placed 2 objects in the center like relics. A fountain pen and a sealed envelope with my name in my father's hand. The codicil. I stood a moment without sitting, letting the quiet decide whether it trusted me. We'll document this like a will reading, Davenport said. Private session, witnesses present. He nodded toward the door. I asked 2 people who don't owe your brothers anything. The door opened. Patricia Chen, a hospital records manager with a librarian's spine and a prosecutor's memory, stepped in and gave me a small, composed nod. Behind her came Ruiz, not the ER doctor from Mariner's Bluff, but Martine Ruiz, accounts payable, Cole Enterprises. 22 years and a flawless attendance record. He carried a spiral notebook and the caution of a man who had seen careers disappear for raising hands. Thank you for coming, I said. Patricia set a digital recorder on the table. If truth is oxygen, she said, Let's make more of it. Davenport read the preamble like a priest with a stopwatch. Private codicil to the last will and testament of Charles A. Cole, opened at the request of beneficiary Ethan Andrew Cole. Witnesses present: P. Chen, M. Ruiz. Date and time. He looked at the clock. 9:04 a.m. He slid the envelope to me. The seal gave with a dry whisper. Inside was a single typed page and a small brass key. The paper smelled like old office and rain. Codicil. Private. To my son, Ethan. The board will never choose conscience over convenience. I designed this so they won't have to. Enclosed is a key to the archive beneath Cole Museum, room B3. In that room are notarized copies of transactions undertaken under my name at the direction of E.G. and others, along with affidavits, draft resignations, and 3 letters of instruction, one for the board, one for the Attorney General, and one for you. You may choose. 1. Deliver the board's letter in private session. Demand adoption of the Cole Integrity Trust, an irrevocable stewardship entity with veto power over compliance decisions, staffed by 3 trustees. You, 1 outside auditor chosen by you, and 1 seat reserved for a rotating employee representative. The trust holds the archive. The company continues under conditions you set, and E.G. departs without ceremony. 2. Deliver the AG letter publicly. The company burns, our name with it. This is justice of a kind. It will punish the guilty and the innocent together. Choose it if the board chooses itself. Either way, keep the watch wound. It's not magic. It's a reminder that time is a tool, not a master. CAC. I read it twice, then a 3rd time until the letters stopped trying to be anything but what they were. The key lay in my palm like a small, heavy future. B3, I said. I'll call the museum, Davenport replied, quietly. We went together. The museum smelled faintly of lemon oil and applause. In the staff corridor, a director with careful hair and worried eyes scanned the key, looked at my face, and decided to risk his job. Down the service stairs, he said, voice low. Back left. Room B3 was concrete, fluorescent, and clean in the way places get when people believe dust is a kind of sin. The brass key turned, and a second lock, digital, accepted a code my father had written in the margin of the codicil. 1979. The year the factory switched its furnaces and he switched his life. Inside, shelves. Gray boxes shelves. Gray boxes with labels so tidy it hurt. Horizon, gray. Offshore. Compliance. Internal. Chair. Draft. We opened compliance internal. Affidavits. Names I recognized and names I didn't. A memo from 2019. Auditor S. Patel terminated after inquiry into Gray Consulting billables. We opened offshore. Wire summaries. Account numbers. Signed approvals with initials that belonged to men who liked their pens heavy. We opened chair, draft, and found a resignation template with my father's name at the bottom and a paragraph he'd never sent. I allowed what I rationalized. I taught my sons to admire the wrong things. I'm sorry. I photocopied nothing. I photographed everything. Patricia cross-checked with a list she'd made from the codicil's index, ticking boxes with an efficiency that made my gratitude sharp. Ruiz stood at the end of the row, reading a ledger like it had written to him personally. He buried this under a museum with our name on it, he said, not accusing, not forgiving. That's either irony or faith. Both, I said. By noon, we had enough to make men behave or descend into italics in front of cameras. We locked the room, logged the visit, and left as if carrying something fragile and loud. Back in Davenport's office, he laid out a choreography that felt like bridge erection notes. Step 1. We notice the board. Emergency executive session. 1 agenda item. Compliance governance. Step 2. We invite 2 witnesses, Patel, the fired auditor, and Ruiz here, employee representative. Step 3. You read your father's board letter. You propose the integrity trust. Step 4. If they stall, we show them the first page of offshore. Step 5. If they threaten, we play 30 seconds of horizon.mp4. Not all of it, just enough to show we are holding an umbrella over their heads and we can remove it. And Gray? I asked. Gray will come, Davenport said. He can't help himself around sharp edges. I went home to change into a suit that said, I don't need your permission. On the kitchen table, I left 3 piles, the board letter, the AG letter sealed and addressed, and my father's watch. I wound it. I told myself that keeping time was not the same as tolerating delay. At 5:30, I met Sonia Patel outside a coffee shop. She was taller than I remembered from the HR exit memo. Hair streaked with the kind of silver accountants earn by arguing with abstract nouns. I thought nobody would ever call, she said. I kept the exit package. I kept the drafts they told me to delete. Why did you get fired? I asked. I told the truth, and the calendar at the same time, she said. They said I was insubordinate. I said math doesn't report to people. She slid a folder across the table. Overbilled consulting hours, double-paid invoices, travel marked board outreach for trips Gray took to islands that had neither boards nor outreach. I wasn't trying to be a hero, she said. I was trying to balance columns. Tomorrow, I said. I need you to tell a room that. I can do tired math in any room, she said. Andrew called at 7. Greg says you're staging a coup, he said, voice small. Is that what this is? It's the opposite, I said. A coup is when the wrong people take power. I'm trying to give power to rules. He was quiet. Greg says, don't go to the meeting. Greg says a lot of things, I said gently. Come anyway. Sit. Listen. And if you can't stand, I'll stand for you. He hung up without promising either. At 8 a.m., Davenport's assistant delivered notices of emergency session to every director's inbox and hand to the chair pro tem's desk. The subject line was a scalpel. Compliance governance, immediate. The body was, politely, arsonist. Materials to be presented on-site only. Attendance required. At 8:40, Gray texted me. Bad form, Mr. Cole, but excellent taste in rooms. At 9 o'clock, we walked into the boardroom. It was built to make humility look like bad posture. A river of lacquered wood down the center, 12 chairs with embarrassments of leather, floor-to-ceiling glass that made the city look like a spreadsheet you could rearrange with a finger. Directors filed in, bringing their perfumes of power. Cologne, printer toner, late breakfasts. The chair pro tem cleared his throat, like a man who had practiced gravitas and gotten a passing grade. Gregory arrived late, on purpose. Andrew slid in behind him, eyes on the table, jacket half on. Gray took a seat near the window, not at the table, posture casual, gaze alert. He wore a pocket square the color of a bruise. Davenport opened. "We are convened for a single matter. Mr. Ethan Cole will present." I stood, felt the room calibrate, and set my father's watch on the table, where everyone could see time behaving. I spoke slowly, the way you do when you want men to hear their own breathing. "My father's will named my brothers as heirs," I began. "This codicil names me as steward of something he could not in good conscience leave to money." I lifted the board letter. In the museum archive below us are notarized copies of transactions undertaken at the direction of outside advisors that materially misrepresented the company's risk. Those copies are controlled by an entity my father designed, the Cole Integrity Trust. I'm asking you to adopt it now. The chair pro tem frowned. "A trust? With veto? Over the board?" "Over compliance decisions," I said. 3 trustees, myself, an outside auditor chosen by me but removable by you for cause, and an employee representative elected by employees, rotating annually. The archive rests with the trust. In return, I do not deliver this. I held up the AG letter to its addressee. Gregory laughed, loud enough to echo in tasteful wood. "This is extortion." "This is governance," I said. "Dad's last one." A banker director cleared his throat. "Is there documentation of these so-called transactions?" Patricia stood from the back row like a blade. "There is," she said, "and there are logs of who tried to erase them." She set a thin stack of copies on the table. "This is a preview. The rest is 10 floors down. Incident reports on acid-free paper." Gray's smile thinned. "Let's not theatricalize routine corporate hygiene." I pressed my thumb to the USB drive in my pocket. "Routine involves fewer islands." Sonia Patel stepped forward. "The overbilling began in 2018, she said, voice stable. "I raised concerns. I was dismissed the following quarter. I brought copies." Gregory's face flushed. "This is a circus. Ethan, if you wanted a stipend, you could have asked like an adult." "I did," I said. "I asked the math." The room shifted. People who had planned to be bored sat up straighter. The pension fund man took off his glasses and cleaned them with unusual care. The insurer director looked at Gray the way actuaries look at cliffs. Davenport slid the trust document into the center. "Resolution 1, he said. "Professional and board like only good lawyers manage when introducing revolutions. Adopt the Cole Integrity Trust as a standing governance organ. Resolution 2. Appoint trustees named in the codicil. Resolution 3. Terminate all consulting relationships with external parties named in Exhibit C." Gregory stood. "I move to adjourn." "No second," the chair pro tem said, too quickly. He looked at me as if surprised by his own spine. "Mr. Cole, the exhibit?" I nodded to Patricia. She placed a single-page Exhibit C on the wood. At the bottom, Gray Consulting, Gray Holdings, and 2 shell names that had learned to be shy. A murmur moved down the table like a weather report. Gray's voice stayed smooth. "I'll save you suspense. If you adopt this, I leave quietly. Your stock will dip for a news cycle. Then the market will reward your stewardship. If you don't adopt it, Some of us will still be rich, and some of you will learn how quickly rich is a verb." Andrew's chair creaked. He looked at me, then at the watch, then at the city. "Greg," he said softly, "I'm tired." Gregory stared at his brother like betrayal had chosen poor timing. "You can't be serious. I'm exhausted with the part where we pretend Dad didn't leave a mess," Andrew said louder. He turned to the room. "He left a mess. He also left a way to clean it. I vote yes." Silence reached out and touched everyone in turn. The banker director cleared his throat. "Compliance costs less than scandal," he said. "Yes. Insurer, yes. Employee elected director, yes." Chair Pro Tem looked at Gregory. Gregory didn't look back. "Yes," the chair said. The motion carried. Davenport wrote the words that made it real. Gray's smile became perfect, which is to say it disappeared. "Congratulations," he said. "You have invented a soul for a company." Gregory slammed a palm on the table. "You're all cowards." "No," I said. They just finally got bored of fear's voice. I gathered the letters. I didn't play the recording. I didn't need to. The room had heard it without sound. Gray stood, smooth as a curtain. "We'll send a statement," he said to the chair. "Use transition and values in the first sentence. Investors like those." "Thank you for your service," the chair said with the bare minimum of sincerity. "Security will escort you to collect your things." Gray looked at me and inclined his head the way old men nod at weather they can't change. "Keep the watch wound," he said. "Stories like this have sequels." He left. Gregory followed, burning a hole in the carpet with his stare. Andrew stayed seated, hands flat on the table, as if the wood were a raft and he'd finally climbed on. When the room emptied, I was alone with Davenport, Patricia, Ruiz, and Sonia. The air felt different, oxygen where varnish had been. "You just saved them," Patricia said. "They'll forget by Tuesday." "I didn't do it for them," I said. "I did it for rules with teeth." Davenport slid a folder to me, the trust's appointments. "You're a trustee," he said. "So are Ms. Patel and Mr. Ruiz. The employee election will handle the third seat next year." Ruiz cleared his throat. "I'm not good at speeches," he said, "but my mother irons my shirts. We'll be fine." Sonia smiled for the first time that day. "Math will keep." I picked up my father's watch, felt its steady pulse against my palm. "We're not done," I said. "We just moved the fight into a room that remembers what it's for." Outside the boardroom, the museum's hallways were quiet, the portraits patient. In the lobby, an elderly couple stood reading a plaque about the company's founding, the sanitized version. I wondered what plaque the trust would one day hang next to it. Maybe none. Maybe rules don't need plaques. They just need to be kept wound. That night I went to the river. The city moved like a machine that had been oiled with relief. My phone buzzed with statements drafted by hands that made lies sound like lint. I turned it over and let it ring. In my pocket, the AG letter was still sealed. I didn't drop it in a mailbox. Not yet. Not while the trust held. Not while my father's last design, the one that wasn't a building or a balance sheet, still stood. I wound the watch, and for the first time in days, the seconds sounded like a promise instead of a warning. The press release went out at 2:17 p.m. Exactly the kind of time that looks accidental. Coal Enterprises announces governance enhancements and strategic transition. 3 paragraphs of words arranged like flowers at a crime scene. Appreciation for long-standing advisors. Commitment to values. Gratitude to stakeholders. The company welcomes the formation of the Coal Integrity Trust to further strengthen compliance. No names, no confessions. Just the soft hum of a machine changing belts while pretending the engine was always fine. By 3 p.m., the stock dipped 2 points, then steadied. By 3:10, a business channel ran a segment with a smiling anchor who pronounced Integrity Trust like it was a new flavor. The crawl at the bottom asked if governance could be a moat. In the studio, a pundit said, "Investors love discipline," and someone off camera laughed. I turned off the TV and faced the part that didn't fit in a statement. The rooms where truth has to live after headlines go home. The Trust convened its first working session in Davenport's smaller conference room, the one with a view of a brick wall and a plant that had decided to survive anyway. Sonia Patel brought a legal pad and 3 pens. Ruiz arrived 10 minutes early and spent all 10 looking out the window like he could teach the brick to be a horizon. "We start with 3 tests," Sonia said, flipping her pad. 1. End all relationships listed on Exhibit C. 2. Restore the internal audit function with independence and budget. 3. Reopen investigations that were closed without findings from 2017 to now. 4, I said. Employee amnesty for anyone who brings documentation in the first 30 days. No retaliation. Anonymous drop. We publish the policy by morning. Ruiz nodded, serious. "People won't trust a speech," he said. "They'll trust what happens to the first brave one." We drafted it. Plain language, short sentences, verbs that didn't hide behind nouns. At 5:22 p.m., the policy hit the intranet and 3 bulletin boards near the cafeterias. At 5:37, an email arrived in the new Trust inbox. No signature. A scan of a spreadsheet with numbers that hummed with intent. 15 minutes later, another. A travel ledger for Gray showing first-class tickets to islands where compliance never vacations. Then a third. A memo from 2020 with the subject line R.E.S. Patel. Exit narrative. The first brave one had a scanner and a conscience. I forwarded the documents to Davenport for preservation, then to the chair with 2 sentences. The policy works. The clock is running. He replied, "Understood," which was the longest message he'd ever sent me. At 6:12 p.m., Gregory declared war. He did it the way men like him always do. A letter to the board that pretended to be concern. "I have serious reservations about ceding control to an unelected body. This trust creates unnecessary friction. We risk spooking markets." He CC'd a journalist known for printing letters whole. 10 minutes later, the letter appeared online with a headshot of Gregory that made him look like he'd been growing in a boardroom since birth. The headline called him a modernist resisting institutional overreach. The comments called him other things. My phone rang. It was Andrew. "He's furious," he said without hello. "He can be," I said. "Anger is the only authority he recognizes." "He's lawyering up." "Then we audit harder." Andrew exhaled, the sound of a man caught between gravity and wind. "He's my brother." "He's mine too." Silence, then soft. I'm glad you didn't take the easy option. I didn't have one. Ethan, he stopped. Greg has a tape. He says he has a recording of you and Gray in a room. He wants to paint you as Elias's new puppet. He was in the building, I said. Cameras exist. So do scripts. I told him not to. He's not listening to anyone. I am, I said. I'm listening to math. After we hung up, a call came from the state attorney's office, an associate to Alvarez with a voice that sounded like a stack of binders. We're monitoring, she said. We prefer you stabilize this internally, but we won't hesitate if you need us. I'll bring you a box if the trust fails, I said. Until then, let us be useful. At 7 p.m., the first in-person test arrived. Security called. A consulting team from Gray Holdings at reception, weekly status meeting. I met them in the lobby with Sonia and Ruiz, the notice in my hand like a badge. Contracts terminated as of this afternoon, I said, per board resolution. The lead consultant, a man with a haircut designed to survive wind tunnels, looked from me to the letterhead and back. We haven't received notice. You have now, Sonia said, handing him a copy. Please submit final invoices with detailed time entries. Anything after noon is a donation. He smirked. This will be expensive. It already has been, she said. After they left, Ruiz let out a breath he'd been holding since 1999. People will tell stories about that, he said. Stories are better than memos. They travel faster, I said. At 8:10 p.m., a calendar invite landed in my inbox from an email that still carried Gray's name, but now belonged to no one. Cole Museum, public Q&A, tomorrow 10 a.m. The subject line contained a single word. Transparency. The invite had been created before the board vote, a quarterly ritual where executive leadership took gentle questions from employees in a curated room. The optics were too tempting to ignore. Go, Sonia said, but don't bring dynamite unless you're ready to live in the crater. I nodded. We bring rules. That night I walked the river until the water stopped talking. Back home, I wound my father's watch and read his letter again. Time is a tool, not a master. I slept like a man who had finally put down a bag he thought was his own and realized it had always been borrowed. The museum's auditorium smelled like coffee and upholstery. Rows of employees filled the seats, some curious, some nervous, all aware that something unnameable had shifted. The stage had 2 chairs and a lectern. Gregory was already there, a microphone clipped to his lapel and a smile that looked stapled on. He waved like a mayor and gestured for me to sit. We're here, he began, to address rumors and reassure the Cole family, our employees, that leadership remains strong. We've made governance improvements because that's what great companies do. I'm proud to serve you as acting CEO during this transition. He didn't look at me when he said acting. He didn't have to. A hand went up in the front row. A woman from logistics, hair pulled back, eyes alert. Does governance improvements mean the company did something wrong? She asked. Gregory smiled. It means we're doing things even more right. She didn't smile back. Like how we did things with Gray Holdings? Murmurs. Someone clapped once, then stopped. Gregory's smile thinned, then returned. We're conducting a review of all vendor relationships. We terminated Gray yesterday, I said into my mic. The trust will publish a summary of changes by Friday. A man halfway up raised his hand without waiting to be called. What's the trust? Who picked you? My father, I said. in a private codicil that designed a structure to keep rules in the room even when money tries to push them out. It has 3 trustees, one of whom will always be an employee representative. And if the board disagrees, more hands, more voices. Then we take our archive to people who don't, I said. Gregory lifted a palm, marshal of traffic. Let's not get dramatic. We're family. A voice from the back. Families hide the worst things. Laughter, uncomfortable. I didn't laugh. Gregory gestured to the AV tech. The screen behind us lit with a still image of me sitting across from Gray in the museum boardroom. Since we're doing transparency, Gregory said, voice oiled, here's a peek behind the curtain. My brother and Mr. Gray had a nice chat 2 nights ago, privately. Makes you wonder whose rules we're keeping. A ripple, some gasps. The image was accurate, the caption was not. I stood, walked to the lectern, and didn't look at Gregory. Transparency, I said, means context. I nodded to the AV tech. Play mine. He hesitated. I showed him a thumb drive. He shrugged, took it, and 2 clicks later the screen showed a different angle of the same room, the security clip Davenport had pulled for our archive. You could see me, Gray, and the watch on the table. You could hear Gray say, "This gives you leverage to force governance," and me reply, "I want rules with teeth, not deals." The clip ended. The room went quiet. In a way, rooms go quiet when they realize they've been in a different story for years and the new one has better verbs. Gregory's face flushed. You edited that. Security did, I said, in 4K. Hands went up again, faster now. Will there be layoffs? Are pensions safe? Did Charles know? Why Patel was fired? What's Exhibit C? Ruiz stepped to a floor mic and did what heroes do when they're not dressed for it. He answered plainly. No retaliation. Audits restarting. Pensions protected. Patel is back as a trustee. He said each sentence like a nail going through wood. When the session ended, people didn't rush the exits. They came forward slowly, touched the stage like it was a rail on a ship, and asked small, precise questions that sounded like Faith rummaging for clothes. I stayed until the last one was finished. When I finally stepped backstage, Andrew was waiting near the curtain, hands in his pockets. I knew about some of it, he said before I could speak. I knew Gray was careless with invoices. I told myself that wasn't the same as stealing. I told myself Dad wanted momentum. What do you know now? That I don't want my name to be a discount code for other men's lies. He nodded toward the seats. They don't either. We stood there, the space between us finally honest. You should have told me, I said. I should have told myself, he said, and for a second he looked 12. I need you, I said. Not as an ally against Greg, as a director who remembers what chairs are for. He nodded. I'll sit better. We stepped into the corridor and nearly collided with Gregory storming out of a side door, phone to his ear, voice sharp enough to cut. He hung up when he saw us. You humiliated me, he said to me. You humiliated this family. No, I said. We rescued it. He took a step I knew from childhood, from hallways where adult voices had been storms. For a heartbeat, I thought he'd swing. He didn't. He straightened his jacket and smiled a smile I recognized from mirrors that don't reflect people, only masks. "Enjoy your little committee," he said. "Boards get bored, investors get hungry, stories get old." "Truth doesn't," I said. He left, shoes loud on tile. By afternoon, the company's internal forum lit with threads that didn't feel like complaint, but like repair. Someone started a channel called Trust Watch and posted the policy in plain language. Someone else uploaded a photo of the museum plaque with a note, "Let's make this worth the marble." A receptionist anonymously posted a scan of a petty cash slush that wasn't petty. Finance chimed in with a spreadsheet. HR deleted nothing. At 4 p.m., the chair pro tem sent a memo. "Effective immediately, Mr. Gray's relationships with the enterprise and its affiliates are terminated. The board adopts a moratorium on external strategic consultants, pending the trust's approval." The word moratorium had never looked so polite and so violent at once. That evening, Sonia called from her office, papers everywhere, hair refusing to behave. "First formal act of the trust," she said. "A department head whose bonus depends on vendor volume wants an exception to the moratorium. Denied?" "Denied," I said, and send him the policy with a sticky note that says, "We'll talk after the audit." Ruiz emailed a photo of a cardboard box set in a break room with a handwritten sign, "Integrity Inbox." By morning, it would be full of those small, stubborn truths that never make headlines and always make futures. I went home by way of the river again. The city was the same and not the same. People hurried and looked at their phones and worried about dinner. Above them, in a dozen offices, a new story had begun, not because a press release said so, but because a room had been forced to learn the old words again. Rule, ledger, oath. In my kitchen, I found an envelope slid under the door. No postage. Inside, a single card. 4 words, block letters. "He still owes me." No signature. On the back, an address. Not a corporate tower, a modest street with a name nobody puts on a brochure. I turned it over twice. I thought of my father's codicil. There's a debt I never repaid. Not all fallout fits in boardrooms. Some of it waits on porches across town, in smaller rooms where the ledger has faces. I wound the watch and put the card in my pocket. Tomorrow the trust would write its first report. Tomorrow Gregory would attack again, this time through proxies who preferred Latin to English. Tomorrow Alvarez's office would call to ask how firm our moorings felt. Tomorrow employees would decide if amnesty meant safety or a trap. But tonight I would go to the address on the card and ask someone what my father owed. Because governance can make a company honest. Only conversation makes a life. The address on the card led me far from glass and marble, into the kind of neighborhood where time doesn't bother keeping score. Narrow streets, cracked pavement, grocery stores with faded signs that said open even when they weren't. I parked beneath a flickering streetlight and checked the note again. He still owes me. The house at the end of the lane was small, 1 story, paint peeling from the eaves. A porch light glowed weakly behind a screen door. For a second I wondered if this was a trap, but curiosity, or maybe inheritance, has its own gravity. I climbed the steps and knocked. A woman answered. 70s, maybe older. Strong eyes. The kind that have outlived disappointment. "You're Charles's boy," she said before I could speak. I nodded. "Ethan." She stepped aside. "Come in. It's cold." The living room smelled of tea and old wood. Framed photographs lined a shelf. Men in factory coveralls. a young woman holding a baby, a group at a union picnic. My father's face was in two of them, smiling, sleeves rolled up, next to a man I didn't know. She followed my gaze. That's my husband. Raymond. I didn't know him. You wouldn't. He worked with your father at the coal ironworks before the company wore suits. She poured 2 cups of tea and sat. Her hands trembled, but her voice didn't. My husband died in '89, she said. The furnace explosion. They called it an accident. It wasn't. I remembered the year on the photograph from the factory, 1989. The same year my father had written Elias Gray, 1989. She continued. There was a safety inspection scheduled that week. Raymond found out they were cutting corners, cheap metal in the valves, a rush to finish contracts. He wanted to delay the shift. Elias told him no. Your father tried to help, said he'd fix it quietly. Her jaw tightened. The next day the valve burst. Raymond never came home. My stomach twisted. And my father? He came to the funeral. He said he was sorry. I believe he meant it. A week later, an envelope arrived. Money, a lot of it. I sent it back. He came himself, left it on the porch, said it wasn't payment, it was debt. He said, if I live long enough, I'll make it right. She sipped her tea. He didn't. But maybe you will. I looked at the floor. I didn't know any of this. Of course not. They wrote that chapter out. The company changed names. The factory closed. The lawyers scrubbed the records. She reached for a small box on the table, slid it toward me. He left this with me the last time I saw him. Said if a young man with his eyes ever came asking, I'd know what to do. Inside the box was a photograph, my father, younger, standing beside a group of factory workers. On the back, in his handwriting, for Raymond's son, if he ever wants to build something honest. Beneath it was a folded deed, yellowed with age. Property title, Coal Ironworks Lot 9, transferred to community use upon claim by coal family descendant. This place has been empty 30 years, she said. The land's still yours, or his. Maybe now it can do something useful. I traced the ink on the deed. What would you want done? Not a museum, she said. Those are for ghosts. Something that helps people who don't get meetings. Apprenticeships, maybe. Scholarships for kids who work with their hands. Raymond would like that. The clock ticked in the corner, the same rhythm as my father's watch. I nodded. He owed you a promise. I'll pay it. She looked at me for a long time, then smiled. Then the debts settled. When I stepped outside, the air smelled like rain. The city skyline glimmered far away, too clean to belong here. I walked to my car, the deed still warm from her hands, and for the first time the word inheritance felt like a verb, not a noun. The Coal Integrity Trust survived the month and then the quarter. Scandals quieted. Audits returned to the language of numbers instead of fear. Employees started using our company again without irony. Gray disappeared from public view, leaving behind a few shell companies that folded quietly like tents after a storm. Gregory resigned to pursue new opportunities and took his resentment to another firm that valued arrogance as vision. Andrew stayed, quieter now, a man rebuilding something invisible. We turned the old factory lot into a training center. The first class opened with 12 students and a plaque that read, Coal Foundations, built for hands and honor. Below it, smaller letters, in memory of Raymond Hensley, who believed safety is dignity. When we cut the ribbon, the woman from the house stood beside me, her cane planted firmly in the ground. "He'd be proud," she said. "So would my father," I said. She smiled. "Then you both got what you wanted." Months later, I visited the museum again. The plaque about my father had changed. Trust policy required historical accuracy. It now mentioned his role in founding the Integrity Trust, and a line he'd written years ago in a notebook: "Success isn't wealth. It's what survives truth." I stood in front of it, the watch ticking in my hand. For a moment, I thought about all the versions of him I'd known: the businessman, the father, the mystery, and how they'd finally become one. Andrew walked up beside me. "You ever think about selling?" "The company?" He shook his head. "The story. People love redemption arcs." I smiled. "It's not redemption, it's maintenance, same as the watch." He chuckled. "You always were the poet." Someone has to remember what words mean. He patted my shoulder and walked away, leaving me with the plaque and the ticking. Outside, the evening sun turned the river to gold. I wound the watch one last time and felt the gears catch, steady and alive. Somewhere in the distance, a train horn echoed, the same sound that used to lull me to sleep when I was a boy. For 20 years, I thought my father's legacy was money. Then I learned it was responsibility. Now I know it's motion. Time that doesn't stop, only changes hands. I slipped the watch back on my wrist, tightened the strap, and whispered the words he'd written in the codicil. "Time is a tool, not a master." The watch ticked in agreement. And for the first time, it didn't sound like debt. It sounded like peace.